give me the beat.
This video is coming out a day late and is being re-uploaded. You may be wondering why. Why am I re-uploading the video? Why is it a day late? Well, you can thank no one other than people associated with Blizzard who decided to copyright claim this video because I dared to use a cutscene from Warlords of Draenor. Now, I don't really want to blame Blizzard for this as much as I want to blame 3 random people who decided to copyright claim it because of an asinine system on YouTube. You see, YouTube has an anti-plagiarism system which allows you to go in and make sure that, your content's not being ripped and put on another channel. But at the same time, as it turns out, if you use content like, say, a cutscene from a video game, which only the developer and the company owns the copyright for, you can still copyright claim someone's video, even though the people who copyright claim it don't own the right to the copyright. So you may notice that this has been a black screen. Well, nothing I can really do about that. I had this really cool idea for a really cool cutscene from Warlords of Draenor, which is one of my favorite World of Warcraft expansions, the expansion I started in. But instead, you get this. And the video will be coming out on Christmas Day instead of Christmas Eve. Not to rile you up any further, please enjoy a 4 a.m. sleepy time Aubrey talking about her 5 favorite games of 2018. Starting us off at number 5, we have a game that will probably be very familiar to people who have been watching this channel for some time. It's a bit of an older series on the channel, but Subnautica is still a game that is near and dear, for reasons that are probably counterintuitive to the reason this is a list. It's not my favorite game because it's fun. It's my favorite game because it's bloody terrifying. Everything about Subnautica, the world, the atmosphere, the music, the monsters, the art design, all of these factor in to create a world that is beautiful. But dig a little deeper and you'll find a world brimming with terrors and danger. It's a great mix of designs. This feeling that, things aren't going too great. You wake up after a nasty blow to the head, you find out you're the only person who has survived the crash after your ship tried to do a slingshot maneuver around 4546b. And from there, you're kind of left to your own devices. How do you survive? Obviously, you have to have food and water. Obviously, you have to have oxygen. But how are you going to thrive? Granted, you can cook the fish using the really bloody amazing fabricator, which can apparently remove bones from creatures during the cooking process. And of course, you can use the membranes of bladderfish to filter the water, hopefully filtering out any pathogens. But that only takes care of 2 things. Naturally, you have oxygen as long as you're on your life pod, but how long is that going to last? When you wake up, the thing's in disrepair. You need to go find materials to repair that sucker so that you can get the most important thing, the radio working. Now, granted, you can't send outbound communications, but at least you can get some idea of what's going on. And this is it. This is where the game kicks off. After narrowly surviving a blow to the head from a pretty sharp piece of paneling, only to wake up a few moments later with the entire life pod on fire, having to frantically grab a fire extinguisher and blow it all out, only to have your PDA mockingly tell you, "Great job not dying." Thanks, bitch. Then you have your first experiences actually going into the world, both of which have minor little cutscenes or in-game cutscenes that play when you open either hatch. Far from the original announcement trailer with the gigantic Leviathan coming up behind you and roaring her head off, the game is a lot more docile when you first start out. You're exploring the world, you're finding all these things. There's a couple of predators in the safe shallows, some dangerous wildlife there, but most of it's peaceful. You go and find magnesium, you go and find some titanium, you build a repair tool, you get everything working, and from there on, well, you're left to find your own way around. Going from place to place, trying to figure out the story. What the hell happened? What shot us down? Who are these people from the Sunbeam? How long is it going to take to rescue us? And will they rescue us at all? Setback after setback. Constantly feeling like the game is trying to push you back into your life pod and like, no, get the hell back in there. Constantly at war with the predatory life forms that call 4546b home. Everything about the game is well done, especially how Subnautica utilizes the terror aspect. For me, it's a no-brainer. I have a dreadful fear of the open ocean. Anything that even remotely could exist in the ocean terrifies me. From sharks down to anglerfish. Even though anglerfish, I understand, are millions of leagues under the sea, they still exist. And with the theory that the megalodon may not be extinct, it's enough to keep me from putting my toes anywhere near anything related to salty water. Subnautica, however, plays on that fear really well. Gigantic monsters sometimes popping in out of nowhere because the
VLOD is kind of crap.
That feeling when you first go into the inactive lava zone, hearing the sea dragon's roars echoing through the caverns, wondering what kind of terrifying creature you're going to find at the bottom. The game has so many plot twists, so many turns, the first time you have a major setback, the PDA counting down from 10 to the explosion. Those of you who have played will know what I'm talking about. The game overall is fantastic, and if you're looking for an open-world underwater horror survival game that is unfortunately not yet co-op, maybe never will be, which by the way is getting a brand new DLC sometime in 2019, known as Below Zero, I'd say Subnautica's worth it. Just bring a change of pants, and possibly a volleyball. Number 4, we go from the horrifying antediluvian depths of Subnautica and into the alternate history of Japan and London that is Nioh. Now, Nioh is essentially taking the hardest bits from all the Dark Souls games and the Bloodborne games and ripping them out of those games and just throwing them in a growth solution vat and seeing what happens, because that's what Nioh is. It's more difficult and more punishing than it has any right to be. It kind of suffers from the Bloodborne experience, where human enemies are more difficult than the actual monsters themselves. The human boss battles with characters like Tachibana Muneshige, a historically very real person, is kind of comparable to the Bloodied Crow of Cainhurst, the former being a legendary warrior of the West, and the latter an NPC who played very much like a player character, throwing me off entirely. Nioh is one of those games that's extremely fun to play. The bosses feel well made and fun to fight, if only after a while, because Nioh suffers from the syndrome the genre of game always suffers from. Practice making perfect, constantly building yourself up to be more powerful and more skilled, learning as you go along, unlocking new skills for the 2 weapons of your choosing out of the 5, and unlocking more guardian spirits to make things a little bit more interesting. However, the game also plays a little bit like some of the isometric titles like Path of Exile or Diablo in the fact that it is a looter-based game. All of the enemies have a chance of dropping decent loot and you're constantly changing out what you wear. The game does suffer from a few drawbacks. My number 1 pet peeve, character customization. Now for me, character customization is a legitimately crippling issue. If I was in that fantasy world, be it of a different race or even different species entirely, I would want that character to kind of embody me. You can probably imagine how much I pay on transmog costs when it comes to World of Warcraft. But Nioh also does some things to kind of aid that. While you cannot change the character you are, good old William, for story reasons, obviously, you can go to the tea house and get new character skins that you can wear in missions. However, they don't use them in cutscenes, and they are expensive as hell. If you consider that you have to kill revenants to get the currency, which are people who have died, think of it like a bloodstain that you can choose to kill, they're pretty much the number 1 way to get the currency. And when you consider characters like Tachibana Muneshige and his wife Genchio cost upwards of tens of thousands of that currency, if I remember correctly, you're going to be farming quite a while. Now, granted, the sequel that's coming out, Nioh 2, seeks to rectify that issue by allowing you to create your own character from the very start. No longer will you be tied to the story of William, the pirate Englishman who's trying to find his guardian spirit Saoirse, who conversely is the reason he can't die from anything but old age. You'll be able to make your own character and carve out your own path, and obviously partake in a new story with Nioh 2. Other than that, I'd say the game, if you're looking for something a little bit more difficult than Dark Souls, but something also of a different aesthetic than the Souls and... I just realized, do we call it the Bourne series? I guess we just call it Bloodborne, because he's not making another one, is he? Of those kinds of games, then I would definitely recommend picking up Nioh, especially if you're looking to get Nioh 2. And at the halfway point, we have a game that's kind of like Left 4 Dead, but also has more difficulty than Left 4 Dead. You know, you like that mindless zombie slaughtering thing that Left 4 Dead's really famous for, but you also want a little bit of a challenge. I'd recommend Vermintide 2. Now, Vermintide 2, formerly known as Warhammer Vermintide 2, takes place after the sequence of events in the first game. The 5 characters are heralded as heroes, and, of course, the threat of the Skaven looms once more. Before they can go in and put an end to it, however, the Skaven, alongside their packed Sworn, otherwise known as the Northlanders or Savagemen of the North, kidnap them. Really, the whole main plot of the second game is you breaking free, getting away from them in the tutorial, and then kind of enacting revenge, kicking some major ass across 3 main acts, which culminate in a final boss. All of the bosses themselves are decent. I wouldn't say they'd be taking the Game of the Year award for best final boss of any video game, but you've also really got to consider the kind of game Vermintide 2 is. While it does have a loosely put together story, it's not really the kind of RPG that would require something like Ganondorf, for example. No, Vermintide 2 is one of those games where it's more fun to be in a group of 4 friends, or even 4 random people, as you go through cutting down swaths of enemies, going through the main acts, and even the DLCs, Bogenhofen and Return to Ubersreich, picking up your loot box at the end of the mission. Now, yes, I did say loot box. Don't panic. Don't you dare click off this video, damn it. I put a lot of work into this. Yes, Vermintide 2 has loot boxes. No, you cannot buy them. Yes, they do contain gear. Sometimes cosmetic items, sometimes gear with a unique appearance, which will be saved to the forge for later use. Sometimes character skins, like custom armors. But ultimately, the way you earn the loot boxes makes it somewhat acceptable. When you first start out the game, you have the option of 5 different characters with 3 careers each. Every career levels up individually, and every time you level up, you get a free commendation chest. Every time you complete a challenge that you haven't completed before, you get a commendation chest. When you first start out the game and you're doing all these challenges left, right, and center, it's really easy to get a lot of chests. If you finish a mission, depending on whether or not you've picked up tomes or grimoires, you get a chest, which, if you have picked up tomes, grimoires, loot die, and the other things, will be an increased level. The chest will actually level up at the end of the mission, which you get to see. The thing is that the loot boxes are integral to the game. They give you loot that you can use to progress further. Starting out on the recruit difficulty and then going further and further into the game, well, you're going to need that loot. Would it be better if there was no loot boxes? Yes. However, if asked whether or not the loot boxes detract from the gameplay and fun and enjoyment I have received from Vermintide 2, I would say no, not at all. There are unique things that happen to the hub zone that you live in. Say, for example, you get one of your characters to level 10, all of a sudden they move out of the little circular antechamber that is the center of the area where you pick up missions and open the loot boxes, check your daily, weekly, and sometimes even event challenges, things like that. And they'll actually move to their own unique room. For example, a pyromancer's room is pretty much a charred mess, and she sleeps on a bed that's made of metal with a very simple cloth blanket. Can't imagine why. I mean, she is prone to burning the living shit out of things, so probably for the best. The same thing goes for all of the other 4 characters. At level 10, they all move themselves out of the center chamber of the hub world, and they move on to their own little unique areas. The elf lives outside, the dwarf lives above the forge, etc., etc. The game, however, progresses even further than that. Complete all of the missions of all of the acts of the main game on Champion, Recruit, which would be easy, Veteran, normal, and Legend, and you'll get banners that hang around the walls. Kill bosses and you can find their weapons being held up in a sort of trophy room. Overall, the gameplay is fun. You have to block, you have to take into consideration friendly fire on things like Champion and Legend, the 2 higher difficulties. If you don't, you're probably going to piss a lot of people off. You have to take into consideration the queues for certain special enemies, like for, say, gutter runners, the equivalent of a hunter in Left 4 Dead. If they show up and you're not with your team, and they've gone over a thing, like say a ramp that they can't get back up and you're not with them, and you get pounced on, you might be screwed. And that's your own damn fault. The hunt for each mission's 3 tomes and 2 grimoires isn't difficult, and after you find out the locations where they spawn, you'll find them every time, but there are unique risks involved. Grimoires reduce your maximum health by 1/4 each. When you have both, your health is reduced by about 1/2. And on higher difficulties, of course, enemies hit harder, so kinda have to play it safe. Sticking as a team is integral to survival. Each character has unique talents. There is a forging system. As you progress towards level 12, where you unlock the final career, you get access to more and more weapons that you can craft. You can upgrade weapons, you can change their illusions, you can change their properties. And going back to that friendly fire thing, there is some really well thought out banter. Really, really good dialogue between the characters.
The Order would have words with him if he lives.
Words, Saltzpyre? Doesn't sound like you.
Oh, there would not be many, and I doubt he would hear them utter. once the fire took hold.
Overall, I'd say if you're looking at, a nice, fun game to play with friends, I would say that, Vermintide 2, if you like that kind of mindless slaughter with a little bit of difficulty thrown into the mix, Vermintide 2 is a perfect game. Speaking of a perfect game, number 2 and I have a little bit of history. In the past 2 weeks, I've sunk about 200 hours into this damn game. The game constantly gets free updates and DLC, like new monsters, new cosmetics, new seasonal events, and things of the like. I'm of course talking about none other than the Monster Hunter franchise, specifically for this spot on the list, Monster Hunter World. You see, my history with Monster Hunter is an interesting one. I played Monster Hunter 3 and 3 Ultimate. Mainly I went to 3 Ultimate because it was brand new and it actually had servers that allowed you to play online, as 3 servers had been shut down a long time ago. The game was enjoyable, and much like with Dark Souls, I kind of missed the boat. I had never played anything up until 3 and 3 Ultimate, and in between 3 Ultimate and Monster Hunter World, I never played any of those titles either. What I would say for the sake of Monster Hunter World, however, is it's an interesting case. It still brings all the unique mechanics, the flagship monster that's a staple of every game, the unique mechanics. All the old weapons are back in this one, everything from the insect glaive to the bow guns and bow to the great sword. But there's one thing that the game does which is actually quite nice as far as longevity is concerned. Monster Hunter World is really, in my opinion, one of the only Monster Hunter games that's approachable. New players will find themselves, having a relatively easy time. They're not going to get their ass kicked right away. That's what, of course, high rank is for. The cutscenes are really pretty. The game is fun, but also not too challenging at the start. It gives you that nice sense of progression. Monsters constantly ramping up in difficulty as you go along, not some steep incline right away. Another thing that helps the game's longevity is the introduction of free DLC, things like the Devil Yo, the Devil May Cry and Final Fantasy XIV crossovers. Specifically the latter one where we got the Behemoth, which is famous from the Final Fantasy series for being a complete dick, but Final Fantasy XIV players might remember that they also got the Rathalos, so, oops, I think. Old fans of the other titles will find that Monster Hunter World's actually a really good game. Being brought into the next generation of graphics, because unfortunately the older titles haven't really aged that well, Monster Hunter World looks pretty damn good. The lighting is great, the sound effects are awesome, the monsters look beautiful and intimidating at the same time. The armor's okay and the weapons aren't perfect, but that's alright, it's a video game, it's not going to be perfect. With the announcement of Iceborne, the G-Rank expansion that will be coming in 2019, the game is far from dead. Sure, there's a little bit of content that is lacking right now, but if you've played World of Warcraft, you'd probably be used to that. To put a finishing touch on number 2, I'd say if you're looking to try a new game, branch out, expand your horizons, Monster Hunter World would be a pretty good start. Accessible to the noobs, still difficult for the vets, an alright storyline with easily 50 hours plus worth of content. I'd say it's a perfect game for the price. But the next title has no price, only that which you're willing to spend. The final title is a free-to-play title. The final title on this list has been with me since I moved to Canada 5, 6, 7-ish years ago now. This title has been heralded as one of the best free-to-play titles of its kind. Also, this game is made by Canadian developers, who have constantly proven that the money you give them for premium currency for things like equipment slots and character slots and weapon slots constantly go back into making great content. Number 1 on this list is none other than the free-to-play over-the-shoulder shooter known as Warframe. Warframe's kind of an interesting one to put at the number 1 spot. I always kind of had the idea that it would be my number 1 on this list because, well, it's the game that kind of kickstarted that idea of going into YouTube. The game is constantly being updated, constantly putting out great content, be it story-driven stuff like The Second Dream, The War Within, The Sacrifice, or even open-world content like the Plains of Eidolon, or most recently, Fortuna. Or if you ask any cats out there, Fortuna. The game's systems all hidden behind storylines, all hidden behind progression. You start out small, you get to choose one of 3 warframes, 2 different choices each for primary, secondary, and melee weapons. But after that, after you get out of Vor's clutches, after you escape onto your dropship, After you deal with Ortis literally threatening to blow himself up because he feels like he's a disgrace, where do you really go? What do you do? I mean, Vor's dead. You just put a bullet between that old bastard's eyes and your head's no longer going to explode like a melon that's had one too many rubber bands put around it. So what is there to do in Warframe now that the tutorial's over with? Well, it's a game that lends itself well to progression, a game that lends itself well to exploration. You unlock more and more things as you go along, unlocking more mastery tests which will challenge you in the ways of the game, sometimes by killing certain enemies which are resistant to certain damage types. Other mastery rank tests require you to master the hacking mechanics, the movement systems, the stealth. After every mastery rank test that you complete, you unlock more stuff to build. More things to unlock, going through, finding more storylines, unlocking more unique warframes with unique abilities and unique kits and unique themes, unlocking Kubros and Kavats, dogs and cats. We have to appease the cat lovers somehow, right? I don't feel like I've done enough justice. I feel like I've just been blindly, stating all the things that make the game great without really explaining why. Yes, Warframe's been part of my life for a long-ass time, and yes, in that time I've given it giant 3-year breaks here and there. Not always 3 years, but you get the point. What makes Warframe great is the story. Standing atop the mountain at the end of the War Within, waking up and realizing that you're more vulnerable, yet more powerful than you've ever been in the Second Dream. Helping the slaves in Fortuna, and saving the people who worship the Orokin in Plains of Eidolon. Helping settle a dispute between Nefania, capitalist corpus bastard that he is, and the leader of the parent sequence, Ergo Glast. Ultimate goal being to help a colony that has somehow found a way to live alongside the infested, and helping one very rich man named Barrow Katir finally come to terms with the grief of his childhood. None of these story chains are mandatory. You can go through the entire game never unlocking the true hidden power inside the Warframe, the main character. But you can, and if you do, you're rewarded immensely. The storylines in the game are detailed, fun, and often give you a choice. Do you want to be good? Do you want to be evil? Or do you want to be somewhere in between? Naturally, I go for neutrality in all things, especially in Warframe. But that's how I play the game. Other people can choose to play the game however they want, and that's the beauty that is Warframe. Being able to build your own character. From the very character that you choose, down to the colors of your Warframe, down to the cosmetics that you add to it, the cyandanas, the pieces of armor, the sigils, each individual mod that you put into the character, choosing whether or not to format each individual mod slot so that that frame is the best possible frame that it can be. Doing the same thing with your weapons and your Kubro, or your Kavat, or any of your other companions for that matter. Going out into the world, hunting down rare mods, fighting titanic bosses just at a chance for that really rare mod like the 11th Stormoff Lephantis. These are the reasons that people play Warframe. The sense of progression is like marbled meat, present throughout the entirety of the game. That, coupled alongside things like clan systems where you can completely customize your own guild hall, being able to make solar rails so that you can control certain points in the solar system, giving people, in exchange for a fee of in-game currency, access to higher drop rates, or maybe even better chances at mods. The ability to go and fight other people's solar rails, the ability to join a clan and build that clan up through weapon and armor, stop saying armor, Warframe, research, being able to uncover new things as the game progresses. You have to understand one thing, is that Warframe started small, but over the many years the game has been being developed, the game has become something fantastic. And to let the mantra of the game ring true, here's a clip from Fortuna.
And we all left, and we're all adrift together, through the cold mist, till we're lifeless together.
Now, obviously, I'm not going to show the whole clip because copyright, but that is the mantra of Warframe's community. We all lift. We're all in this game together. We all do everything. We all partake in missions, alerts, boss battles, Arcwing missions, open world stuff like Plains of Eidolon and Fortuna. We all go through the same story. The one thing that's different is that our playstyles, our characters, are unique to us and us alone. Hope you all enjoyed my top 5 list. What do you think? Do you agree with my list? Do you have your own list of 5 games of 2018? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what your favorite 5 games were of this year. And to cap off this video, since it is the end of 2018, just about, I'd like to say that everyone who's subbed this year, thank you all so much for helping the channel grow. Same with all the people who subbed in 2017. I appreciate you all. You're all wonderful people, and I love you to pieces. And as for the people who viewed my content this year, thank you for stopping by and checking out the Everneth Gaming channel. Other than that, if you're having any kind of event going on over the holidays, whether it be Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, Christmas, whatever, I hope you're hanging out with family that you love, that care about you. I hope you have good food. No, that's not to be offensive. I just really love food. And thank you all for really making 2018 matter. I know in the gaming industry, things haven't been going too great, but as far as my life's gone, you all have really made this a worthwhile thing. There are times when I think YouTube isn't going to work out, and I look at my sub counts, and, I'm like, hey, people actually think my content's okay. So thank you all again. I've been your humble hostess, Aubrey from Everneth Gaming. I love you all. You mean the world to me. And here's to the end of 2018.